Hi everyone, I'm here with my friend Dr. Melinda Skau, and the reason that I wanted to do a video like this was because I just wanted to introduce you to people that help encourage and inspire me as well as the people around them, and I just thought that she'd be somebody that would be helpful for other people to get to know.
Thank you, Joyce. Very kind of you.
So we're here at Dr. Skau's home in California, and so I just thought maybe we could meet and talk a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, what inspires you, and how you've helped your patients to make changes and that kind of thing. Okay.
Okay.
So
sounds good.
So why don't you tell me or tell everybody a little bit about what you do?
Okay, so I am a family medicine physician who just took my exam in lifestyle medicine because I really want to use the natural methods like diet and exercise and water and rest and sunshine, spiritual resources. So I really want to use the natural things for healing instead of so many drugs. And that's my goal with my patients.
So when did you start thinking along those lines? Because that's different.
I think it's been a transition over the last 35 years of my practice, gradually realizing how powerful the natural remedies are, that they work and they don't have the side effects that the pills have, and just the transition of trying things. I remember when my kids were very young and my daughter had some asthma, and so we tried going dairy-free, and that helped the whole family. So sometimes little changes,
little tiny changes,
So, and it's so easy now because we have so many other options.
Right, right.
So
now, you know, sometimes when people think about lifestyle and natural remedies, I think that they think that this is just for some very you know, simple things. Like for when things get really complicated and you get really sick, then you have to use like those big guns, right? But you've probably seen some people who have recovered from pretty serious problems using some simple remedies.
I had a patient with zoster rash shingles, and it was a pretty big area around her chest, and we put a thick charcoal poultice on it, just put a big paste on there, and I think we probably did it once or twice a day, not more than 3 days, and the skin was like baby skin, zero pain. When you only take medications for shingles, oftentimes you'll have post-operative neuralgia for months or even years. So this was very, very effective with no headaches and nausea like you get sometimes with the tablets.
I think that's so helpful for people to know about natural remedies. And you know, too, when you get sick, is that if you just take a medicine to help with the symptoms and you're not doing something to improve your immune status, that you might end up having the same problem again, or that medication may just take care of the symptom and then you might have a side effect. And so
it's really important to scout out the cause of the problem, the root cause. So I also had a patient that came in with a very bad dog bite of the hand that was infected. And he was actually one of the employees at our facility. And he said, Dr. Skau, I know that you do natural things. Because I wanted to send him to the hospital right away. You know, hand infections are bad. And so I was going to put him on IV antibiotics. And he said, no, I know you do natural things. And I was like, oh, I don't know. You know, this is really serious. But he said, I'll see you as often as you want me to see you. And so we put a charcoal poultice on his hand and started him on a whole plant food program with lots of the antioxidant foods, the colors. And I saw him every 12 hours faithfully because I didn't know when I was going to ship him off to the emergency room. But actually, he did great. And within 3 days, that hand was like new. It was amazing.
You know, I had the same kind of thing with one of our employees. She had a dog bite as well, and it was getting quite swollen, and cellulitis was developing, and she didn't want to go to the hospital. And we, you know, I just had her get some charcoal and showed her how to make a poultice, and it was the same kind of thing. In the end, I did ask her to start an antibiotic because I chickened out, you know, because when you're the one that's involved, you're thinking,
irresponsible.
You know, but she, I don't think she really needed to even start it. You know, it was because I wasn't there. There was nobody that was going to be overseeing it. So
I've had 2 diabetics in the last couple months with pretty significant inflammation of their legs that could have been started on antibiotics early, but of course, as a community of physicians, we're really trying to avoid the use of antibiotics because we're seeing so much C. difficile. Clostridium difficile is a bad diarrhea that comes when you take antibiotics and kill off the good bacteria.
And it's hard to get rid of,
Hard to get rid of, and especially for people who are already ill from something else, who are immune compromised.
Yes.
I've actually had 2 patients die from that, patients that were cancer patients who were already very ill when they got that disease. And so I really try to avoid using antibiotics in my patients if I can.
Right.
So for things like sore throats, sucking on activated charcoal works great.
Yes.
You know? So, and for these diabetic iffy, do I start antibiotics or not?
Yes.
Putting the charcoal poultices on is amazing. Within 3 days, patients always come back to me and say, oh, I can't believe how much better it looks.
Yes. Okay, so I think, these are really interesting stories because unless, you can learn about natural remedies, you can learn about the techniques, but the stories really help you learn when to apply them and how to apply them, right?
Right.
And so this is really cool. So the other thing that I thought was really neat about talking with you was just how you go about talking to your patients and inspiring them to want to make change. Now, the interesting thing about what Dr. Skau is doing is that she is the medical director at
Feather River Tribal Health.
So, and this is a healthcare system for Native American,
First Nation people. About, I think 47% of our patients are First Nation people, and the others are people that are just signed on because they love our clinic. It's a beautiful clinic, has
anybody
a waterfall
can sign
in the middle.
up for this.
And they just come to our clinic because they really enjoy the care we give there. We really focus on preventive medicine.
So I think the interesting thing is that they have now built a lifestyle center.
It's a wellness center right next to our main facility that will be opening soon as we can get our use permit.
Wow.
And we'll have acupuncture and massage and we're hoping to get a chiropractor. We're looking still to hire a chiropractor. We also have physical therapy.
Yes.
We have a gym. And of course, the wellness facility, as of right now, is open to Native Americans only.
Okay.
Our other services are open also to the community, but until we find out what the use is and whether we can keep up on that, because I think they build some of these facilities with Native American grants.
Now, I think, for me, going through my own health issues, I realized how important, how connected the whole body is, right? Because it's like you're talking about physical therapy, and physical therapy you tend to think of just if you had like a major surgery on a shoulder or a leg, or chiropractor you think about, for the same types of things. But it's amazing how, you can do something with your teeth and your jaw can affect your spine, which can affect, things that go down, because that's going to affect, possibly your pelvis if it's not aligned, and all these kinds of things. It can just travel down.
And mind and body are like this too.
And that's true. So that's the other interconnected part, is just how if you're not well, it affects, the way you're thinking and you're feeling, and the vice versa is, if you're not thinking correctly and you're not feeling correctly, that can really affect your health as well.
Right. I think attitude is huge. If you think you can, you probably can. Yes. And if you think you can't, you probably can't. So it's deciding that you're going to be well.
So what is, how do you go about inspiring your patients to want to do something different in their lives?
So I have a handout that I usually go over with my patients. It has the 8 natural remedies. It starts out with nutrition at the top. And I recommend a diet that's as high in the whole plant foods as possible. Okay. So I have a picture of a tree on that side of the chart, and I list the whole plant foods, the things like vegetables and fruits and whole grains and nuts and seeds, avocados. And then I have another side of the chart that lists the animal and processed foods. And I have down arrows on the animal and processed side. Every little bullet has a down arrow. And I have up arrows on the whole plant food sides. And I just tell people, try to eat less of these things that are animal-based and processed foods, and more of the things that are whole plant foods. For instance, the apple is way better for you than the apple pie. And the corn on the cob is way better for you than the corn chips.
Yeah.
And the real 9-grain cracked cereal or quinoa or barley or brown rice is better for you than the fry bread, which many of my patients like.
So you're just trying to help them to make simple changes, little by little.
Little by little. And I just encourage them. So I usually ask them, how many servings of whole plant foods do you think you get in a day?
Right.
And some of my patients will have to really stop and think, I don't remember the last time I had a whole plant food. They don't, some of them don't eat fruit or vegetables. So I just kind of coax them and ask them, what do they think they would be able to do? Yeah, and most people like fruit. Most people are willing to have a fruit after each meal. And a lot of people like salads. They're willing to have one salad. And a salad might be 3 or 4 servings of vegetables.
Right.
And a lot of people like things like sweet potatoes, which are the amazing fast food. You can bake it or microwave it in a few minutes and just eat it the way it is. It's really healthy with high fiber and lots of vitamins, vitamin A. And so I just kind of find out what they do like that they would be willing to add to their diet. And I usually have them sign a little paper that says, I'm willing to do 3 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, or whatever they're willing to do, whatever they're ready to do.
Well, that's an interesting thing. You haven't signed kind of a contract.
I do. I have them say, you know, are you willing to do this? Would you be willing to sign your name? And then I have them put it on their bathroom mirror where they're going to see it every day, or on their refrigerator. Someplace they'll see it and be reminded, oh yeah, I told Dr. Skau I would try to get a fruit with each meal, you know. So.
And you have seen that make a difference.
I have. I really have. I had one lady who took my 8 natural remedies home, and I didn't see her for 3 or 6 months. And she was, in the beginning, depressed and about 30 pounds overweight and had a lot of back pain, physical problems. So she came back to see me, maybe it was half a year later, and she looked magnificent. She looked so happy and healthy, and I was just stunned. I said, wow, what are you doing? And she said, well, you know that little paper you gave me? I went home and I did it all. And I was like, whoa.
You did?
I went home that night. I told my husband, you know that little paper I give everybody? I got to do it all.
That's true. I mean, the thing is that when we encourage other people and they actually take it to heart, it's really encouraging for us.
It is. To see how it really is powerful.
Yeah, and it makes a difference. And I think that's one rewarding thing about doing this is that it helps encourage you on your own path.
It does.
Right? And when you're encouraging someone else, I think you feel more responsible to stay on that path.
Yes.
Right?
And I oftentimes see patients who share with their families or their friends, this is what I'm doing and I'm feeling better. And when they share it, I think it makes them more committed to keep doing it.
I agree. So, you know, something interesting about you too is that Dr. Skau spent a number of years in another country.
Yes. We spent 10 years in Nigeria, almost 10 years, training doctors. My husband's a general surgeon and I was family medicine. So we actually had a residency program that was called General Medical Practice. And it was a combo of surgery and family medicine so that doctors that were out in the boonies could do 99% of what came in the door.
So this is in Nigeria. And so you were training Nigerian physicians.
Yes.
And they went to school in Nigeria for medical school, and then you were doing the residency program.
We were.
So how did you decide to go to Nigeria? And for so long, that's 10 years is a long time.
It was an amazing turn of events. My husband was actually driving to work one morning, and he was just thinking about the work he was doing, and he thought, I don't think I'm doing anything that the next surgeon can do, nothing particularly special. And
I understand that feeling. I understand.
You feel that way about ophthalmology too?
Well, I feel like, you know, I enjoy doing surgery and I feel like I do a good job, but I do feel like there's so many surgeons who can do what I do. So when I go on mission trips, I try to teach people about how, you know, if they get sick, what they can do. Right. And because I feel like, you know, if I just give them medication or if I just operate on them, you know, they're no better off the next time, you know, or when the medication runs out.
Right. The teaching is for the long haul.
Yeah.
It makes the real difference.
So, but I understand. Okay.
So he's driving to work and he just is praying and asking God, is there something else you'd like me to do? And it wasn't very long after that his partner suggested splitting the practice. And so my husband was a little surprised at first because we got along with the couple great and we weren't expecting to split the practice, but he came home and really prayed about it. And the next mail that came to us was a letter from our dear friends Greg and Kathy Saunders, who were already in Nigeria working. He's a general surgeon, she's a dietitian, and they needed a general surgeon and a family medicine doctor. They did not have a budget yet, but they needed us.
And they had never asked you or talked with you about
we
coming
didn't have
out
a call out or anything. It was just kind of out of the blue. And we actually started looking at our life situation at that time and realized that we had just paid off our school loans. My grandmother, who had lived with us for 6 years, had just found a home with my dad, and my husband had just gotten his fellowship in general surgery. Just all these little factors that we were waiting to happen before we went overseas as missionaries were done, and it was time.
Wow.
And the amazing thing, we had just bought a 5-bedroom house in a blue-collar town, and it was a big house with a swimming pool, and we thought, how are we ever going to sell this thing? And as it turned out, my husband decided to fly over to Nigeria and see what the need was. And he said, honey, sell the house while I'm gone. And he was kind of half joking, you know.
Thanks a lot, honey.
but what ended up happening was I started praying about it, and I showed it about 3 times. People always said, nice house, too expensive.
Right.
And then one morning, the Lord just really impressed me that I should sell that house to whoever came around and asked for it if they said they were praying about it. And I called my husband in Nigeria and told him what I had prayed, and he's like, you prayed what? You know? And then I said, well, if they say they're praying about it, we'll know they're the right people. And the next couple that came through was a teacher and her husband. This was the end of July. They needed to be in a house by August. And she looked through the house and she said, wow, this would be perfect for us. Can we go home and pray about it for the weekend?
Okay.
And when they came back on Monday morning, they just sat down on our couch and they said, how did you come to the price for your house? And I said, what we paid plus the improvements. And he just took his checkbook out of his vest pocket and said, God gave us a verse out of Joshua that said to go take this land.
Wow.
It was pretty amazing. Yeah. So
That's
God definitely gave us a lot of
amazing.
indicators that we were on the right path going to Nigeria.
I think that's really such an amazing place to be when you know you want to do God's will, and you start moving in that direction, and God gives you signs that you're doing the right thing. And I think that's something that people maybe get a little confused about, because I think sometimes people just want it written out for them before they even step forward. But I think sometimes, you know, when you move forward in faith, that's when you get more confirmation.
Like with Joshua, when the priests put their feet in the water, that's when the water opened up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is really cool. And you enjoyed your time there in Nigeria.
We did. It was both the most difficult thing we've ever done, because we were, for a long time, the only 2 doctors at a 100-bed hospital. So it was very demanding. It was like being residents for almost 10 years. So as far as sleep loss, my husband would take the first half of the night and I would take the second half of the night. Only I'm afraid he lost more sleep than I did, because he's the surgeon.
Every single day.
Every single day. Yeah. And it took us a long time. There were sometimes doctors that came in and out, but we were the only permanent station doctors up in the north for a while. So it was demanding, but it was also very, very, very rewarding. And we took a trip back there about a year and a half ago, and got to see some of the seeds that we had planted sprouting. And that was really exciting.
That is really cool. That is really neat.
Yeah.
Can you share a story about somebody?
Oh, the one that just really warmed my heart was a farmer that came by. They had a little tiny motorcycle, and his big football player-sized son was riding on the motorcycle behind him. And he stopped at the place we were staying on our mission trip this last time, and he said, you probably won't remember this boy, but he was a little toddler and he was starving with malnutrition, and you came around and brought him canned milk at that time. You know, we would have soy milk and stuff, and now look at him, and he was this tall, healthy guy, and he was doing the Lord's work. And you know, sometimes while we were there, I thought, oh, we haven't really brought anybody to Christ yet, as far as, you know, we aren't really saving, you know, numbers of souls. But then I thought, you know, because we were there, people came to the hospital and they got to talk with the workers who knew their culture and their language, and find out about Jesus from them. Right. And then we left behind people when we left. And so God actually gave me a dream. It was a dream that I was up in heaven, and this little Nigerian boy ran toward me and threw his arms around my legs and said, I'm here because of you. And it was like the little glimpse that I had that our 10 years were not wasted.
Oh, yeah. You know, I think that's something that a lot of us, whatever you're doing in life, no matter how you know successful you may look to other people, much of that time is spent in doing, you know, monotonous things sometimes, right? And you can feel like, is my time just being wasted? And am I making a difference? Right? So even if you're in Nigeria and, right? Because everybody's like, you are doing such a great job in Nigeria. You're sacrificing and everything. And it's amazing that you spend 10 years and you're like, did I waste this time? Right?
Now, I don't think I ever felt the time was wasted because we grew so much personally from it, and it gave our kids to grow up with a chance to grow up with a worldview and a view of service, and we just loved the people.
Yes.
You know, we still have friends, and so it was. I would never thought it was wasted, but I did wonder if anybody would come to know Jesus from that.
Yes,
time.
right. Yeah, I shouldn't say wasted, but you know what I'm saying. Like maybe did I make the difference that I wanted to make? Yeah, no, wasted. No.
That's right.
So, and then you came back to the States?
We came back. We were about 6 months in Loma Linda, where I worked a little while at Kaiser, where I had worked before we went out to Africa. And then my husband was getting training to reemerge. You know, if you've been out of the United States for 10 years, it takes a little while to get back into your specialty.
I would be afraid of that, yeah.
And then we moved to Maine for a few years. We worked at Brunswick Hospital in Maine, and that was a really cool, it was funny, I used to pray when we were in Nigeria, Lord, can the next place we go be a beach? And the Lord said, maybe you weren't specific enough about what kind of beach you want. We ended up on the rocky coast in Maine. but it was great. It was great. We really enjoyed our time there. We could go cross country right off our land, and there were forests around us, and lots of places to kayak out in the fingers of the ocean. And it was great.
Sounds amazing.
It was a great place.
That sounds amazing. And I hear that the people on the East Coast there, they're really, you know, great. And
they're so rugged souls, because you know they have to shovel all that snow, and
it builds character. I grew up in Wisconsin and Michigan, and I felt that way. I felt like, you know, all these people in California have no idea about how hard life can be.
That's right. But so we enjoyed our time there very much.
Okay, that's great.
But then we came back. California is home.
Yeah,
so
I mean, like, how can you beat it here? You know, it's nice.
It is. It's beautiful.
So that kind of brings me to the subject where I was first introduced to the idea of you.
Oh.
But that was at a talk that you gave at Amen, which is a medical conference. And you were talking about
adverse childhood experiences.
And I thought this was a really interesting thing because, you know, you're talking about how when you were going through your residency at Kaiser, that even, I think, prior to you coming there, that there had been a study that had been done on lifestyle.
Well, there was a study, it was Vincent Felitti, who was doing a weight management program. And it was a very complicated weight management program. It was a Cadillac program. They had art therapy and dance therapy and group therapy and private therapy and nutritionists and exercise and everything. And people were losing weight gung-ho on that program. Some people would lose 300 pounds in a year on the program. But then he started noticing that suddenly his star patients would suddenly gain weight faster than it was physiologically possible.
And I'm sure people listening or watching can probably relate.
Right. You lose weight and you get it all back.
Yeah.
And he didn't understand why that was. So he thought, well, let's go to the source and let's interview the patients that have lost the weight and then gained it suddenly back. And what he heard were repeated stories about some kind of trauma that happened to the patient before they were 18 years old. And then they would get a reminder of it after their weight loss, and it would make them put on the weight. And what he discovered was that the weight, which doctors think of as the problem, is really the patient's attempt at a solution. It is like the inner tube around the belly that protects you from having to be too intimate or having people in your space. And some people would, instead of getting all the weight back, they might start smoking, because if you smoke up a cloud of smelling smoke, then people will come close to you. So he and Bob Onda from the CDC interviewed 17,300 some patients from Kaiser.
Wow.
It was a big study, and they could follow those patients out 20 or more years because they had Kaiser charts, Kaiser records.
Yes.
So they could see what they had 10 points that they asked questions about, 3 different types of trauma: emotional trauma, physical abuse, whether you had a parent in prison, whether you had watched one of your parents be injured by the other parent. So there were these questions: sexual abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, and so neglect, a child that doesn't have enough food or clothing. Anyway, there were 10 questions, and they just what he found was that the more factors you had, the more you were likely to get heart disease or autoimmune diseases, many diseases that you wouldn't think of relating to the childhood trauma. And it was actually a stronger risk factor for heart attacks than the usual risk factors we consider, like smoking and high blood pressure and cholesterol.
So you're saying that having adverse childhood events was more closely linked to heart issues,
heart risk, heart
attacks, than something like smoking.
Right, which was astounding to people. They thought, how could that be? But it's because in early childhood, if you have a lot of those stresses, you see, your mom and dad fighting violently, the child has all this cortisol response, all this stress response, and they don't know what to do with that. And it's very, very hard on their body.
And they probably go through life with the same mechanisms, right?
Right.
Because I think what happens when you have trauma at a young age, you learn certain defense mechanisms and survival mechanisms.
That's so true.
And these kind of become your MO for the rest of your life. Unless you're very self-aware and you have good guidance and, a spiritual, way to look at things. And
what I tell my patients, oftentimes, you've probably experienced this, that you'll go through an event which really flares up your emotions. And it might be a small event of today, but it's the molehill in your landscape that reminds you of the mountain in your past of trauma. And it touches a common thread. And if you can sit with those feelings in the moment and allow God into that place and ask, what are the messages from this that I'm feeling about myself or about God or about others? What are those messages? And allow yourself to feel those messages and kind of peel back the layers of the onion around that. Okay, so let me illustrate with a story.
Okay.
So a few years ago, I was at a Bible conference, and there was a speaker there who had been a trainer for speakers. And I had gone to one of her classes in the past. And at the end of her class, she kind of came over and whispered in my ear, I think you have a good potential to do speaking in the future.
That's so nice when someone does that.
Yeah, she affirmed the gift and she encouraged me. Yeah. And I didn't know if she did that to everybody who was at the class, or I had no idea. But it did encourage me, and I kind of bonded to her. She was like she was a mother figure to me.
Right.
So then
it's so nice to have a mentor.
It is very nice. So she came to the conference, and she wanted to take a picture with all of her previous students. So we're all standing up front, and she wanted me to stand in front of her in such a way as to make her look thinner. Okay, so I want to look thinner. And that just kind of struck a chord in my heart. And on the way home,
she just wanted you to hide her.
On the way home, I just started crying. And I thought, wow, Lord, that's really out of proportion to the event that just happened. I had a way deeper emotional response than the event.
Yes.
So then I asked the Lord, so what's this about, Lord? What am I really sad about? Why am I crying about this? And so the Lord usually will show me, well, you're what I'm feeling sad about. And I kind of peel back the layer of the onion. So it's like, I expected her to be my mother. I'm missing my mother. My mother had died, and I was missing my mother, and I expected her to be a mother figure to me and take care of me. But instead, she was using me to make her look better. And so it didn't fulfill my expectation.
Not that it was like such a big deal type of thing, but it just for you, it just felt.
It triggered an emotion, and an emotion from some time in the past.
Right.
And so then I could ask the Lord, so Lord, what's so bad about her, wanting me to make her look better? It's like she wasn't mothering me. I wasn't getting the mothering. And what does that mean about you? Oh, that means that I'm not special. I'm not worthy of being loved. You know? So the Lord and I just kind of talked about this and peeled back the layers and of what it meant. It means I'm not lovable or I'm not loved, you know. Since my mom died, there's not anybody that loves me that way.
Right.
And then the Lord said, is that true? You know? And then I thought of all the verses in Scripture that God has given us that say we're precious in His sight, and He loves us with an everlasting love, and He delights in us, and He has a future for us with hope and a plan. And so I thought, no, Lord, that's not true. I know you love me. You love me enough to die for me.
Yes.
And so I could replace those feelings that flared up that were totally out of proportion to the situation. She meant no harm at all to me. She was still a wonderful speaking teacher and still someone I could go to as a mentor. But she wasn't my mama. And I was having unrealistic expectations. So the Lord could replace those feelings that came up from that and heal not only the feelings that day in the car, but the feelings that it connected to from the past.
Yes, right. And I think you bring up a really important subject, which is this: when you have these emotions that come out inappropriately, you know, and what you said, it wasn't in proportion to, you know, what had just the situation that had taken place. It has to do with these emotions that are unresolved.
Yes.
And that you haven't really figured out yet. And a lot of people have those issues. I think that's why we have these issues with relationships where people aren't able to communicate in a meaningful way, or they're always arguing, or there's, you know, all these reasons for why, you know, whether it's at work or in the home or whatever situation you're in. I think that's such a huge thing. And because people are hurting and are unable to admit, I think, to themselves how much they hurt. Right?
That's true.
Because when you were driving on your way home, you could have just cried and you could have just held on to that and said, that woman, you know, she really didn't meet my needs here. Right? Because I'm sure you were tempted to feel resentful.
That's right.
Right?
I just remember feeling wounded. I don't really remember feeling resentful. I just remember
feeling
hurt.
I'm just saying, as far as, you know, how different people can take things. So some people can take it as hurt. Some people, you know, they're going to feel like, I deserve this or whatever. You know, you can see all kinds of emotions happening.
We recently had an experience at my work where someone interpreted someone's actions toward them as negative. They read them as negative, and the person had no intention of those actions seeming negative. And it was because they were framing them, I'm sure, from old circumstances, and you know, if someone else treated me that way, that must mean that's how you mean this.
This is something that you have to learn. You know, we're all on this journey, right?
We are.
Sometimes even now I think, you know, I thought I learned that lesson, and I have to refrain. That's right.
That's
very intentional about that. And so, but I just think that it's really important for people to know that, you know, these adverse childhood events, we've all had them.
That's right. I tell my patients that. I actually hand out this quiz to my patients because what Vincent Felitti found out was that if a patient would take this quiz of just 10 questions, it only takes a few minutes in the office, and then a compassionate provider would just ask the patient, how do you think these things are affecting your current health?
Yes.
Just doing that could cut their symptom scores for their illness, whatever it was, lupus or MS or cancer or heart disease or back pain, could cut their symptom scores by up to 30%.
See, 30%.
It's a lot.
That is huge. I mean, I don't think you have a medication that can cut your symptoms 30%.
That's right.
Without major side effects,
That's right? That's
and so you're saying that just by people taking this questionnaire, do they have to have someone asking them, how do you think it impacted you?
That's in fact.
Or can you just take the questionnaire?
Dr. Felitti said that even if he told the patients to take the questionnaire and put it in a lockbox with the promise that a compassionate caregiver would read it, that still lowered their symptom scores by 30%.
See, you don't even need a compassionate care provider.
But it really, for some of my patients, it's like there's a pimple there and you've popped it and released all that pus. Because they've never told anyone that they went through all these difficult things before they turned 18.
Right.
And I always affirm to them, these things that we go through, the things that we survive and we weather, they're the things that make us strong and compassionate and wise.
Yes, right.
Yeah, they make us real people.
Yeah.
Winston Churchill used to say a lump of coal that does well under pressure, that's a diamond.
Yes.
So I tell the patients that are going through the hardest stuff, you are becoming a diamond. You are a diamond for these things you've gone through.
Yes. And I think too, a lot of times people, when they go through these things and when they are tempted to feel these emotions and feelings, that when it festers inside, it feels a lot worse than when you articulate it.
Yes.
Like if for instance you were able to write down, how am I feeling, what are these thoughts that I'm feeling and these emotions that I'm feeling, once you get it down on paper, all that ugliness, it's really not so bad.
It helps if you can express it, and if you have an understanding person to express it too, that's great. But God's always there. He's always handy.
And that's what I tell people too. I say, write down the feelings that you're feeling, write down the thoughts that you're thinking, and then write down, as you circle these thoughts, try to pray about it and ask the Lord, are these thoughts correct? Because
does it match with your word? Is this what your word says?
Is this what the Bible says? Because a lot of times people have these thoughts like, I'm all alone, or nobody cares about me, and these are some of the thoughts that are driving some of these emotions.
Right.
And then you can look at the Bible and say, okay, is this the truth, or is this is this the devil just trying to mess with my mind and ruin my life?
That's right. That's right.
Right.
The devil can be very, very sneaky. In this issue at work, he almost caused a rift between really dear friends.
Yeah.
And we just had to really go back to God's word and say, what does it say in those situations? And we came up with Matthew 18:15-22, that it says if you're having a difficulty between two people and you can't resolve it between the two of you, bring a third person in and talk with it with a third person and forgive each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is huge.
It is. It lowers blood pressure.
See, forgiveness lowers blood pressure.
It does.
I have seen that to be true too. I went on a mission trip to Micronesia, and there I was doing like a week of prayer for students, and then I was available for prayer and just talking to them. And one of the faculty members at the school, she needed to talk. And I found out that she had about 3 TIAs. And her blood pressure had been like 250 over 175. I didn't even know it was possible.
So a TIA is like a mini stroke, right? Something that resolves within 24 hours, but it's almost like a stroke. And you have a high chance of having a stroke later.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying. And so, before I pray with people, I just like to know what's going on in their life. And so I just asked her, hey, what kind of stresses are you having? And come to find out, she was really stressed out. I guess her mother had passed away, and she was in her 60s, 50s, I can't remember. And her siblings, they were all older and, taking care of themselves and whatever. But she was made to feel responsible for her family by her mother. Her mother kind of said, can you look after your dad and all these people?
Right.
And I guess there had been some resentment that had come up. And, why these things happen as far as the resentment and how things affect you, everybody's going to be different. But, as we talked about it, and I just asked her, I said, hey, do you think you're responsible for the salvation of your family? Is that what Jesus would want?
That's a heavy...
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
because I think she was feeling that way. She felt that responsibility that she had to make sure that they were all doing okay. And then she felt the resentment when they weren't taking care of themselves. And so we just had to look at to see, what is the truth as it is in God's word. And then we prayed about it. And the next week I had to leave. But she sent me an email. And in her email, she said, Dr. Joyce, she said, it was such an answer to prayer that you came. Because, the week after I went to the hospital, I had my blood pressure checked. It was 140 over 75. She says, it's never been that low. She said, all my labs were normal. She said, and now I go around praising people. Because as soon as we prayed, she had this smile on her face. She just beamed peace. You know, when I saw her at meetings later in the week, she just looked like a totally different person. She just, her countenance, you know, the expression on her face had totally changed. And so I have seen it, you know, make a huge impact on people's lives. Just this thing of forgiveness and prayer and trusting in God and being able to take God's word and make it a reality in your life.
Yes, that's right. God's word is just a treasure trove of truth that can guide us with our health and with our mental outlook and with our relationships. It's just rich.
Amen. Yes. So I think that's the most important thing, right? You know, when we talk with patients, it's not like, you know, I think some people think that they're afraid of this whole mixing God with health and all of these things, right? People are probably wondering why I talk about God, or, you know, right?
Right.
But I guess, you know, for me, I feel like knowing where you came from and why you're here on this earth and where you're going, I feel like it's a very important thing, and it really adds a lot to how well you are going to be able to go through trials.
Yes,
right?
Because if you think that the whole world's problems are sitting on your shoulders and you're responsible to solve all that, that's a huge burden, a responsibility over which you have no authority. Exactly. And a lot of people are trying to solve a lot of things that they're not responsible for. Worry,
insomnia, you see that. A lot of people, anxiety, you know, these people are trying to solve the problems that they were never given that responsibility for. They can pray about it.
Yeah.
God has that responsibility, right?
He does. Yeah. And he has the answers in his word.
Yes. Okay, so before we close, do you have like a favorite Bible verse or you know, something that you want to leave behind?
I think one of my favorite verses is Psalms 94:19.
Okay.
It says that in the multitude of my anxieties, you, O Lord, are my consolation and my comfort. And I've actually gone to my comparison version on my eSword and looked it up in lots of different versions, and it's quite different in different versions. But it's just so rich, that idea that God alone is the one that we can go to with all our anxieties, our multitude of our thoughts, any worries that we have, and he is the one that gives us consolation and comfort.
Amen. Amen. Well, I hope and I think that you know, people are going to be blessed by listening to your testimony and meeting you, and perhaps if you live in this area, you know, in the Oroville area, and you're interested in healthcare that addresses all aspects of health. Right. That you will give Dr. Skau a look up, and you know, I'm sure you have other health practitioners.
But we do. We have a group of, we all work together. We share charts and we work with each other. Okay,
so I just want to let you know, there are people out there who care about the things that you do, and are caring about whole person care. So thank you so much for meeting with us.
And thank you for listening.